to episode 472 of the HaskinCast Podcast on our journey to episode 500. Doing something a little bit different this week, something I've kind of wanted to do for a while, and I thought, who better to do it with my friend who absolutely loves talking about movies, has very intelligent and great conversations about movies. My buddy from every podcast that isn't the HaskinCast or Uriah Heep, because he's on every other one, and sometimes on those. Corey Morrissette. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to hear about this new special guest you have that talks intelligently. Who's that? When are they coming on?
If you look in a mirror, you can see him pretty clearly.
Oh, I tend not to do that.
Yeah,
Mirrors
same here.
Yeah.
I don't even like to edit my own voice, let alone look at myself.
Oh, I hear you. I was working on a podcast all day today. I'm like, I'm just sick of me. And I still got, I can record with Scott though, but that'll be fun at least.
Yeah, and you don't have to edit it, so that makes it easier.
Even better, because we tend to talk for like 4 or 5 hours. Hopefully not tonight.
No.
It's already pretty late in Canada, but.
Yeah, well, it's same time here because I moved into your time zone.
That's right, yeah, 9 o'clock. Oh, happy Boxing Day, my friend.
That's right, happy Boxing Day. That's what is Boxing Day? I've never known.
Oh, that was a British thing, if I remember correctly. I don't know the history offhand, but I'm pretty sure it's an English thing.
Oh, okay.
Boxing Day is a holiday celebrated after Christmas Day, so it's always on the 26th. It was once a day to donate gifts to those in need, but has evolved to become a part of Christmas festivities, with many people choosing to shop for deals on Boxing Days. It originated in the United Kingdom and is celebrated in several Commonwealth nations like Canada.
Wow. Very cool. I don't even know what the 12 days of Christmas are because Bob and Doug McKenzie stopped on like day 7.
Yeah, and then they jumped 12, and then it went back to 5, and it was a whole thing.
I would love to know how they put that together because, you know, you get so used to, as a drummer, you know, your metronome, you know, where you're supposed to start and stop, and they're just like starting whenever, not on the beat. And man, I'd love to know how they did that.
They got really drunk and just hit record. That's usually how they did those things. They used to record like 20 Bob and Dougs on a Sunday.
Yeah.
They just get like a 6 packs of 2-4s, which is a shit ton of beer.
Mm-hmm.
And they would just, because the whole Bob and Doug thing, I think we talked about it before, was a big middle finger to the CRTC,
right? Which
is Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Council here in Canada, who looked at SCTV and said, your show's not Canadian enough. And they said, but we're all Canadians in Edmonton recording, at a Canadian studio with a Canadian crew, and we're Canadian cast and writers. How are we not Canadian enough? What the hell do you want us to do? Put on toques and just sit around, cooking back bacon and drinking beers in front of a map of Canada? And that's when Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis says, well, that's exactly what we'll do. So they just wrote down a list, just topics: hot dogs, topic, perfect. Mm-hmm. Beer, topic. And then they would just sit around the studio on like a Sunday, get really wasted, and just knock off like 20 Bob and Dougs and just tag them on the end of shows. There's your Canadian content.
Jeez. And they're so good at improv that they could just say hot dogs, we're going to talk about that, and just make it work on the fly.
Exactly. Like beer. Like Dave Thomas is like, it wouldn't be something if you like shoved a mouse in a beer bottle.
Right.
And then you took it to the beer store and got a free 12-pack or something. And that became a whole thing. And
then they put it in the movie and referred back to them putting it on the show when they had the guy in the audience going, they did this on their show.
Exactly.
I thought that was brilliant. Yeah, I love those guys. So I think it's safe to announce this because you've already dropped the original 15 episodes of one of your new podcasts. I don't know if any of your other new podcasts will be available by the time that this airs, but why don't you tell us about your new old podcast?
My new very old podcast, yes, that started 4 years ago. It's called The Power of Positive Geeking. And if I can, maybe I'll just give a brief history. But,
yes.
My kind of foray into podcasting started, I was working with a group doing a movie trivia league over YouTube. I started off just editing stuff for them because it was a lot of fun. And then I became like a commissioner of the geek division, which is all kind of your geek movies like Star Wars, Star Trek. And that's how I became friends with Mark Kamire and other folks like John Mariano and Thomas Rissling and Jeff Saunders. We all kind of met in this movie trivia league. Well, they all kind of broke off because it turns out that community got really toxic really fast. Mm-hmm. So they left and they started their own thing called the Feeding the Monster podcast feed. And they each had a show on that podcast feed. And I was a little slow on the uptick. It took me another few months before I left the movie trivia league. But after that, one of them reached out and said, we were kind of hoping maybe you'd consider doing a podcast and joining the podcast feed. And I said, well, I always kind of had this idea. I think we've kind of forgotten how to talk to each other when it comes to certain things. And one of them is movies.
Yeah.
We're very much, or really all art, like music, a lot of things where it can be just like, I'm right, you're wrong. The thing you like sucks, and you suck because you think it sucks. And I really hate that discourse. I remember being in film school and having intelligent conversations with people about movies. And I thought, and we don't talk positively enough about the things that we really, really love. I always hated the term guilty pleasure. You should never feel guilty about taking pleasure in something, right? If you love it and celebrate it.
Yeah.
And find people to talk about it. So I said, I want to do this show called The Power of Positive Geeking, where folks can just come on. We're going to talk about a movie that they love and have a lot of fun doing it. So I started doing that show on the Feeding the Monster podcast feed, as well as guesting on all their other shows and stuff. And got about 15 shows in before that podcast feed kind of dried up and went away. And then I kind of got out of podcasting for a bit until Mark asked me to come on one of his shows to talk about Eddie Van Halen after he passed. And that kind of, lit the fire again. And so that's when I started getting into the Van Halen show and the podcast will rock. And then Backtracks Aerosmith Revisited with yourself, and Backtracks theme music with John Mariano again. And then ultimately the Ultimate Catalog Clash with Kevin Brown. But I always kind of thought, I miss talking about movies.
Yeah.
Because I love movies. I watch movies all the time. I thought my big stress with doing that show was finding guests. And I have a much bigger network of folks that I know now. Like, I bet you it won't be as hard to find guests for that type of show. So I just kind of put out the call if anyone would be interested. And about 20 people put up their hands and said, yep.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm going to just going to take the first 15 episodes because they were pretty good. I had some really good guests. We talked about some cool movies. I'm going to repackage those and I'm going to drop them as kind of season 1. And then, mid-January, we're going to start producing new episodes of The Power of Positive Geeking. So I reached out. Kevin Brown and yourself were the first two I asked.
Nice.
Said, is there a movie you'd like to talk about? And Kevin Brown's immediately said, Three Amigos. Like, well, that's great because I love that movie. And then you reached out and said, what do you think about Big Trouble in Little China? I'm like, well, that's perfect because, and I haven't seen that movie in forever and a day. So any excuse to watch a John Carpenter movie again, I'm all in. So the first 2 episodes will be those 2 movies.
You got to watch that at least once a year. That's a movie that you just have to take a couple hours out and just have pure enjoyment for a couple of hours.
I love John Carpenter. And that is such an original, cool movie. Kurt Russell, at kind of the height of his powers, like it's just fantastic. This is like, Escape from New York, The Thing, era Kurt Russell. He's just knocking it out of the park. I can't wait to talk about that movie.
Yeah, because he can play the badass Snake Plissken, the non-caring, non-feeling, or mostly non-feeling Snake Plissken, and then he can turn around and play Jack Burton and pulls both of them off beautifully. And now he's Santa Claus, which is about as iconic as it gets. And he's doing an amazing job at that. I heard that they're working on number 3.
That's right. He's really a national treasure. We need to appreciate Kurt Russell a lot more.
I wish he'd done more movies. He's one of those guys that if he'd have done 50 or 60 movies, I'd watch every one of them.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Now you're more connected to movies than just that. You're part owner of a movie theater.
Well, not really an owner. What we did is we started a not-for-profit co-op or cooperative that has a volunteer board, and I'm currently on that board. Even before the movie theater, my wife and I owned a video store back when those were a thing in town here. So we had a video store for a few years in town here, and then videos went away.
Yep.
But we had a theater in my town here, for 80 years. And the company that owned it, just the building was in such disrepair that the boiler exploded one day. And it's one of those boilers that is literally part of the foundation. You can't take it out. So once that exploded, they said, you know what, we really can't do anything with this building. So they shut the theater down. That was like 2019. And you don't realize how important that is to a community until it's gone. Like that's really a coming together place for a lot of people. I was talking to a friend of mine about the power of cinema. Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, they say, well, like Marvel movies aren't cinema. They're just amusement park rides. I'm like, well, I don't know. I was in a full theater with 200 people. And these 200 people, I guarantee you, did not agree on everything. They're on different political sides. They're on different social sides. Like every single thing is dividing us as a society right now. So I saw Trump supporters and Biden supporters, or in Canada, Trudeau supporters and conservative supporters who just disagree on everything, on vaccines, on if the earth is round, on dinosaurs, on all the dumbest things that we argue about right now.
Right.
200 people got together in the same room and they were cheering on their heroes against Thanos and hooping and hollering when Captain America caught Mjolnir in the air, or when Captain America is ready to take on the whole group of guys in Avengers Endgame by himself and he hears "on your left" and the portal's open and here come all of our heroes and they're cheering. It's like for 2.5 hours, all these people got together and were united and together again. I thought, if that's not the power of cinema, I don't know what is.
Well, and they're also all very cold.
That's also true. But Avengers came out in May, so it was only chilly.
Oh, there you go. Well, you're absolutely right. Did I tell you about the time I saw The Blair Witch in the theater?
No, but that'd be a great one to go see in the theater.
It was. I mean, a lot of people complained about the shaky camera because they weren't used to handhelds and running. And granted, that's not a common thing that you would see in like a Hollywood movie. But I went to the midnight showing, and it was a foggy night in Colorado, and I lived right by a little forest and a small lake. And so, it's like the perfect setting to go see a horror film, especially at midnight. And the theater oversold the tickets. So there's people sitting on the floor in the aisleways, standing in the doorway, complete fire hazard.
Right.
And at the end of the movie, the lights come on and it's dead quiet and nobody's moving. Everybody's just sitting there, not sure what to do. And then one woman just goes, "Get me the hell out of here." And everybody just jumped up and jammed through the doorway. I mean, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I thought, this is the equivalent of going and seeing Halloween in 1979 in the theater, or The Exorcist, when people were literally throwing up in the theater because of what they were seeing.
That's so crazy. And that's, you're talking about a movie that literally had sticks on the ground. It had people terrified. Like, there's nothing to that movie when you think about it. Mm-hmm. It's the dumbest thing, but the way it's constructed, it just works perfectly. It's like, oh my God, it's a pile of rocks. Yeah. And you're terrified at these rocks.
100% psychological brilliance. And not only that, but I think what kind of tied into that too is the way that they did the marketing. I mean, doing a sci-fi special about the history of this non-existent witch, and, making the found footage and everything, because that was unheard of. Like, all that really tied into it. And I walked into the theater going, this can't be real, because there's no way all the families would ever agree for this to go public. Like, they would never let that be seen.
No, and I knew it wasn't real because I saw the cast on the Jay Leno show, like, before I saw the movie.
Well, that helps. But it was brilliant because you never saw anything. I mean, it's got to be one of the best low budget movies ever made.
Yeah.
And then somebody followed it up with crap.
Oh, they always do. But one of the most profitable too. I think they shot that thing for like, $50,000.
Oh yeah.
It made like 128 million, I think, in North America. So
well, and they really didn't have to pay for music either, because the only music you heard was coming from the car radio. And I think they played something in the background in the hotel, and that was it, because they're out in the woods and they didn't bring a boombox.
That's right. Yeah.
So even that, they got to keep their costs down. I mean, it was just brilliant. I feel bad for what they put the actors through.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty brutal.
And those guys didn't get paid hardly anything, and I don't think they had any residuals. So as the studio is making money hand over fist, the cast wasn't.
Right. And then they did the second one, but it wasn't the original guys that did the second one. They walked off because they weren't happy with it.
It was the original. One of the directors. No, it was. He's a documentarian, actually. Mm-hmm. He did a series of films on the West Memphis 3. He also did the Metallica documentary, Some Kind of Monster. He directed the second. It was one of his first scripted movies, and he talks at length about what he wanted it to be and what the studio kind of forced him to make. And
it wasn't a great story. That didn't help. But this isn't a Blair Witch podcast. You know what it is? It's a Glenngary Glen Ross podcast.
Boy, there's a left turn.
Just about as far as it can go. I had this movie on while I was doing some stuff a few weeks ago, and something I noticed that I had never noticed in this movie before. And I've seen the stage play. I've attended it live. It was amazing. And I've read the screenplay. I've watched this movie a ton of times because I love it. And this never dawned on me before. And so when we get to it, I'm going to be very curious to see what you think about it. But overall, what are your thoughts on this movie?
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closes. I love it. I remember this came out, 92, I want to say?
92, yeah.
Yeah. So I was in film school in the fall of 92, and I think it was one of those movies I was circulating kind of around the film classes. Like, have you seen Glenngary Glen Ross? Like, it wasn't a huge hit. Mm-hmm. We had to kind of seek it out to see it in a theater, but it's a masterclass in acting. Like, it's incredibly well written. David Mamet wrote this. The playwright wrote the script as well. Mm-hmm. He also wrote one of my favorite political movies of all time called Wag the Dog.
He wrote that? That's right. He did, yeah. Amazing
movie. But truly just a master. Like, Jack Lemmon is a tour de force in this movie. Like, we were, and actually in one of our film classes, we had to like find examples of certain elements of films. And I think somebody, when it came to just like acting, just brought in their VHS copy of Glenngary Glen Ross and just played any scene because it didn't really matter. Just play it at any point, and you're going to get a master class in acting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about the casting, I don't think they could have picked a better cast for this. I mean, the people that had positive chemistry worked really well. The people that had negative chemistry worked even better.
Yeah, I was thinking Edharris.
Yeah.
His whole point of the movie is just to be mad at everybody, but he was that better than anybody.
Yeah, he really does. And it's funny because when I first saw it, all I could think about was him in Creepshow and that horrible dance he was doing. But I'm watching him be just so serious, and the tension, you feel it in his body when he speaks. I mean, it's so powerful.
Oh my goodness. You're talking, that's sad that the first movie you think of with Edharris is Creepshow, when he was, Academy Award nominated for The Truman Show, for Apollo 13, which he should have won for. Like, he was just in that film. Think of movies like The Abyss, and just what a chore it was to make that movie with James Cameron, and just to survive that experience and give the performance he does. Edharris is just amazing.
Yeah. I think I always go back to Creepshow because that's the first movie I saw him in. So
I haven't seen the original Creepshow in a while. Did he have hair?
Not well maintained hair, but yes, he had hair.
Okay.
In fact, I think that's part of what made the dance so funny, was that the way that his hair kind of shook as he danced. And that's my favorite one of the 5 shows on that, was the Father's Day episode, which made it even better. But I think him, especially the way that he interacted with Alan Arkin in the first half of the movie, it was just brilliant. I mean, Alan Arkin's character, complete idiot, but he played it off so well.
It's funny you say that, because he didn't want to do the part because he thought he was a complete idiot. But when he kind of recontextualized the part and thought of him more as an innocent as opposed to an idiot, that's how he could kind of get around it and play it as well as he did. I don't think Arano is so much an idiot as he is just kind of naive. And you really get that, like, I guess we're going to give spoilers on a movie that's 30 years old and all, but after the break-in, when it's Al Pacino as Ricky Roma and Alan Arkin's George Aronow are sitting there, and Aronow's just like repeated, like, man, do you think the leads were insured? Like, that's where his mind went.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think like they're going to be mad that, like, they had those insured, right? Like, they're not going to lose money, right? Like, more of an innocent than an idiot, I would say.
Well, I think the problem I had with him was more along the lines of, okay, so Edharris is telling you, I'm going to have an alibi. What do you got? Well, why didn't he just say, I'll go get an alibi then. I'll go across the street to dinner. And this restaurant that obviously we're very well known because we're even having our calls transferred there. I can just stay there and have a drink, and they'll have seen me and they'll know I didn't steal the leads.
Again, if he's innocent, he questions everything, right? Like, why? Why is it? Why do you say? Why are you saying that? Mm-hmm. It was kind of that same thing. Like, well, why would you say that? Like, why would I need an alibi? No, because you were listening. Obviously, that's stupid. Right. But it was the way he was processing it.
Yeah.
So when I see Alan Arkin, I don't see an idiot. Like, Alan Arkin, again, absolute treasure. Watch Little Miss Sunshine. Mm-hmm. Watch Argo. Just brilliant in everything, and he's brilliant in this too. And that's such a different character. Like, we have such different characters in these different guys. Like, you would think even Al Pacino's Ricky Roma, because all they do is really talk about him for the first like half hour, and it turns out he's not the skeezy scumbag that you would think. Turns out that's actually Shelley Levine,
right?
Jack Lemmon.
Well, and I'm so torn on how I feel about Levine's character, because I will never defend stealing for any reason, but at the same point, I'm like, I get why he did it. You feel that pressure of his daughter. This is his last chance to make money before he gets bounced out of his job. But I also didn't understand, and maybe you can shed some light on this, Corey. I didn't understand the pressure of the immediate job. So Roma comes in after selling, James Link, and he says, "This puts me over the top. I win the Cadillac." But the month wasn't over yet, so anybody could have gone out with the leads they had the night before, sold 5 or 6 units of Mountain View or whatever, and been ahead of Ricky. So how is that a final that he definitely won the Cadillac?
So there was only a week left. I think that was kind of the ticking clock.
Mm-hmm.
They had like a week left. And, he would have been over 100,000 at that point. I think the nearest guy had 27,000, if I remember correctly. And that was Edharris' Dave Moss.
Right, yeah.
So he had a pretty healthy lead.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, only the top 2 guys get to keep their job. The rest are fired.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah, I would be happy with a set of steak knives and keeping my job,
sure.
I suppose. Even though it seems like a miserable life.
Oh, God, yeah. It's just funny on the... used to be a show on Bravo or whatever called Inside the Actor Studio, and Jack Lemmon was a guest. And somebody from the audience asked a question like, the host asked, what profession other than your own would you absolutely not want to try? And he said, salesman.
Kevin Spacey was on that, and somebody in the audience asked him, I want you to tell me to go to lunch.
Would you just go to lunch, Shell?
And he did. He pulled it off brilliantly, too. It's got to be weird for the actors because most actors do not sit there and watch their own movies over and over again. And so, they've moved on 10, 15 years later, and they don't remember even what they said in the movie. But yet the fans are the ones that are like, I know this movie backwards and forwards. I could recite it blind. And they put you in that position like, I need you to recall this character that you did 10 years ago and remember your dialogue.
Well, and I think in a part that memorable, too, or in a movie that memorable with that cast, you're going to remember a lot of things. I know Alec Baldwin probably gets asked all the time what ABC stands for.
Yeah.
And he was originally supposed to play Ricky Roma when they were kind of on the fence with Al Pacino. Al didn't know if he wanted to do it.
Really?
Alex was like, yeah, Alec Baldwin was going to play Ricky Roma. And then when Pacino took it, he went back to the part of Blake, which wasn't in the stage play, I found out.
That's right, yeah.
For the show, yeah, that was just little extra exposition for the movie. Mm-hmm. But man, is that an effective scene. Holy cow.
Well, and I want to get back to that in a second, but I'm very curious. Do you think Alec would have pulled that off? He's very dry and matter of fact. I don't know if I see him as Roma.
He can be charismatic when he wants to. That's the whole thing with Ricky Roma, right? Like he's in the bar and he just sees a sad sack, mm-hmm. and he cold calls him and he just sells him on these properties just out of nowhere. It's really impressive how he does it. You really need to be charismatic, mm-hmm. and I think Alec Baldwin could have tapped into that. He's a pretty charismatic guy, but just because Ricky Roma is so kind of iconic with Al Pacino, and Alec Baldwin is so iconic as Blake. Mm-hmm. That it's hard to see them in other roles outside of that.
Well, I will say the addition of the scene was a great thing because you don't really get a sense of the intensity in the screenplay, I don't think. And even when I saw it on stage, I remember thinking, if I hadn't seen the movie and hadn't seen that whole sequence with Alec Baldwin, I don't think I would really understand and appreciate the depth of what's going on here.
Yeah. No, I totally get that because you need that scene to kind of set everything up.
Yeah, and I have to wonder if David Mamet didn't add that to subsequent editions of the screenplay for stage. It seems like it just would have been like, well, that probably needs to be in there now.
Well, no, they did. And actually, yeah, later adaptations actually use the movie kind of script as its Bible as opposed to the original stage play. So, yeah, they do include that.
Oh, okay, good. Well, you mentioned cold calling in the bar, and let's take a moment to give some props to Jonathan Pryce, who, man, he played the perfect nervous Nelly.
He's so good, and that's not really a part I've seen Jonathan Pryce play a lot, but it's more so when he comes back to the office the next day.
Yeah,
and just how nebbish, because it's all about like self-confidence, right? And like a good salesman would look at that guy and know the way he slouched over at the bar, mm-hmm. not talking to anybody. Like this is a guy with like no self-confidence. I could sell this guy some fucking property for no reason. Yeah. But it turns out his wife has a pretty strong backbone. Yeah. And it didn't really matter what Ricky Roma told him. was like, my wife said, I need to get that check.
Mm-hmm.
So you better give me that check.
Exactly. And I have to say, there was probably a reason he was at the bar alone that night. And I have a feeling it was his relationship.
I would think so, yeah. Because and you can, like, even that next day in the office, Ricky's kind of new, like you said, okay, whatever your situation is at home, that's yours.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about this. He's almost kind of like trying to get him to open up about it so we could find another way in. So he can make sure that this deal goes through before the 3-day grace period. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't work. And then, of course, we had the whole thing with Kevin Spacey's character coming out and just kind of screwing up the whole operation.
Which led to one of the best speeches in movie history, as far as I'm concerned.
Oof. And the downfall of Shelley, too, kind of playing right off that. But yeah, I guess when they were shooting that to get, during Kevin Spacey's close-ups, mm-hmm. Al Pacino would be off camera, and I guess he wasn't saying the scripted lines. He was just giving a lot of personal insults to Kevin Spacey to try and get that reaction.
Wow.
And afterwards, he'd have to walk up to him, put his arm around and say, no, you're great. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just trying to. and he made sure, too, that the sound crew wasn't recording his side of it because he didn't want that audio to leak. But I guess it was pretty personal mm-hmm. to Kevin Spacey to kind of get that reaction from him.
Well, yeah, because they would just overdub the actual speech over. But that right. could always end up in a blooper reel or whatever. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the look, you really just kind of wanted to reach through the screen and hug Kevin Spacey and go, dude, I know you messed up, but seriously, you're human. It's okay. It'll all work out. Yeah, you might lose your job and yeah, you probably will, but you're human. You just felt so bad for the guy, but even though he deserved it.
He did. And it needed to be, because then we have Jack Lemmon's character riding the high of making a sale. Just piggyback, yeah, you really are a piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of puts that deep-seated hatred mm-hmm. in Kevin Spacey's mind when he finally figures it out. And Jack Lemmon goes, why are you doing this? Because I just don't like you.
Right.
And you don't blame him. You treated him like shit for just 10 minutes there, and then you slipped up, and you said one thing wrong. He's like, well, how did you know that check was still on my desk? And
mm-hmm.
dun.
Yeah. Well, and they set up the relationship with the two of them in the beginning after the scene with Alec Baldwin, when he was trying to get Kevin Spacey to give him a couple of the good leads. Look, I'll pay for them, and we'll do this deal together. And you could tell that they had a camaraderie of some sort professionally at some point, but they were really opposing forces. And so you kind of understood where Kevin Spacey was coming from and why he disliked him so much. And why he saw him as, you're kind of a loser. I'd be glad to get rid of you. Oh, look, here's the perfect chance.
Yeah. And it kind of comes back to my whole thing about this industry that they were in is, okay, so you have these leads, people fill out information, yeah, I'm interested in owning real estate. Mm-hmm. These leads get sold to these companies that then take those leads, cold call these people, and try and sell them on stuff they don't want or need. But right. These leads are so bad. So here's Kevin Spacey handing out these leads, and they're telling him any real salesman can close any of these leads. You got to close these leads or you're fired. Jack Lemmon actually closes one, and then Spacey's like, yeah, that's a shitty lead, though. These people have no money. They just want to talk to salesmen. Mm-hmm. So it's what a colossal waste of time. There's no way you can win. Even if you sell this lead, it won't matter because these people don't have the money. It's what's the point then?
And this brings me to the reason I wanted to have this conversation. But before I get into that, I'm just going to step back a second and say there was a twofold purpose for that earlier scene between Kevin Spacey and Jack Lemmon, and that was to also show Shelley's desperation, why he would eventually be the one to rob the office, because he was so desperate with the situation with his daughter. They set that up with the phone calls to the hospital and that scene with Kevin Spacey. So I thought that was a brilliant scene, because otherwise I don't think you'd get the real depth of just how desperate he was at that point.
Right.
But the problem I have is that I don't think the real villain of this was Moss or Levine. I think it was Kevin Spacey. And the reason I say that is because it dawned on me when I was watching it the last time, was that Kevin Spacey handed him that lead knowing full well they didn't have any money in the bank. So even if he closed it, it was going to do no good.
Yep.
So he didn't set him up to rob the place, because obviously he had no way of knowing that would be the eventual outcome. But, and it actually had nothing to do with the outcome, because he thought he closed it. And that would have been after he robbed the office anyway. So, but isn't Kevin Spacey kind of the bad guy for handing him that lead in the first place, knowing full well they had no money?
You know, I'll take that one step further. I think the real villains of the piece are Mitch and Murray, the two bosses that you never see, because they're the ones that give them the leads and instruct Kevin Spacey to give them the leads. They're the ones that set up this whole sales contest where first place gets a Cadillac, second place gets steak knives, and everybody else is fired. I think it's a way of cutting out some of the old dead wood, like the Shelley Levines and the Aronoff, or the Aronoff. That's a drummer. Kenny Aronoff.
Yeah.
you can tell I don't really look at the character names so much, because they don't really call them by their names or anything other than Ricky Roma.
Right.
But George Aronow.
Aronow, yeah.
Yeah. Some of those older guys, get them out of there. You notice in the movie, Al Pacino has the Glenngary leads. He doesn't have the leads yet, but he has the information.
Right.
So that's what he sells to James Link. So not even the other guys have that. Clearly, Ricky Roma is the top salesman.
Right.
And I don't think Mitch and Murray give two shits who finishes second, just so they can get rid of the rest and maybe get some new blood in there.
You know, that's a good point. I hadn't really considered that. So really, you're seeing Kevin Spacey more as a victim of Mitch and Murray's plot.
A little bit. Like, he is obviously villainous near the end because he doesn't have to turn Shelley in.
Yeah. He takes a little too much glee in that, I think.
Exactly. But he's also treated so badly at that point. You kind of get it, too. Because, Jack Lemmon is so great, but he goes from, kissing his ass to hating him and just treating him like garbage, and then kissing his ass again, and then treating him like garbage when he thinks he made that sale. Until he finds out, that sale was bogus. Nothing's going to come of it. And you just see, just all the hope just kind of drain out of him. Yeah. And then he realized, well, I'm going to jail now, too. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and how's my daughter going to survive the hospital with her father in jail?
Right, exactly.
And then he goes to pleading. Now he's just begging Kevin Spacey at that point.
Yeah, I'll give you 20% of all my commissions I make ever. And Spacey again says, what commissions? You're done. You're toast. You can't sell anymore.
Yep. And he does the classic thing that most men do. Well, 20 years ago, I was great, and I'll be great again.
Yeah.
Like the guy who was the quarterback of the football team in high school and had a couple of really good games. Yeah, man, remember that game and the October of our senior year, and I got 4 touchdowns, and that's their whole legacy, is what they did a long time ago. And because he hadn't been, but he had the skills to do it. But if they're not giving him anything that's really sellable, because I guarantee, what would Alec Baldwin have done with that lead? There's no money in the bank.
Yeah, well, he said, obviously it was a bullshit line, but I could take 3 of these leads and make $15,000 tonight.
Yeah.
It's really? Because they show some of those leads, and it's I don't know if anyone can sell this. Because there's the younger couple where the husband, Jack Lemmon, actually goes to his house. This is another scene that was not in the stage play. And he's like, my wife filled out the thing. I had nothing to do about it. We have no money. We don't want to buy any property. And a lot of the leads were that, or just crazy old people who like talking to salesmen. And it's how could, nobody could sell those leads. But then Ricky Roma somehow has eked out a pretty decent living doing it.
Right. But if he's getting the more premium stuff, up until there's nothing to give it, because it's all stolen, and he's just giving out, well, I got crap in a box. I guess I can give you that, the Patel card.
Patel.
Quick shout out to Bruce Altman, who did a great job playing Larry, the husband in that scene. Just love the way that he just handled Shelley. And he's like, I have to be polite. I'll let you in. But once I know for sure that you're who I think you are, now I'm going to just yell at you and kick you out. Yeah.
Still did it kind of politely, though.
Yeah.
It was a good character. Yeah. And everything else on the phone, and you feel for these guys, because I tried selling stuff at one point after film school. I had to sell tapes and CDs door to door.
Oh,
and these aren't good, not good tapes and CDs, like bargain basement kind of stuff. But we'd pay $50, get our bag of inventory, and then we'd pick an area and just go door to door and try to sell this stuff. And man, it was tough. I think I did it for 2 weeks. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This is impossible.
I've never heard of that. I mean, I've heard of door-to-door sales, like vacuum cleaners and things like that. I've never heard of CDs.
Yeah, tapes and CDs.
Wow.
This is 1994. It was wild.
See, that's what happens when Columbia House stops offering those great deals that they used
There
to,
you
where you
go.
get 9 albums for a penny. God, I miss those days.
I found my best customer. There's actually a weed store in Regina, Saskatchewan, where I was living, called Vintage Vinyl, and they would buy used CDs and stuff. Like, and these were new CDs, but they were kind of junky. I think one of the best ones I had was a John Lennon Double Fantasy. I think was probably the best one I had. But sometimes they would take my CDs and either trade me for other CDs that I could try and sell, or just give me a few bucks here or there. So that's cool. How I. After film school, I was living on peanut butter and jelly. That's how I afforded the peanut butter and jelly. If I could sell $20 worth of CDs, hey, there's something.
Thank God I had a part-time job at Burger King because I could eat.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking too, if it was around that time, that's when CDs were just albums flat transferred with no digital warming or anything, and they sounded like shit.
Yeah, especially if it was there was never any remastering. If they're taking like an old vinyl on a CD, like anything that was kind of newer was okay. Like anything from 84, 85, usually you got a pretty good decent sound. But any of the older stuff, like if I was lucky enough to get some old Foreigner or something, it never sounded all that great.
Yeah, definitely. Most annoying character, I'll give to the detective.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, just, dude, you can see what's going on around you, right? Like, quit trying to interrupt it. Let it play out, and then you can get your interview.
But he really wanted to get to lunch. Remember?
He sure did. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, he went with George. We just go to lunch. Just go to lunch.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I mean, I don't think. And I know we're going to talk about this at the end, but I don't think there's any character that they chose in casting that I would have said, I think somebody else could have done this job better.
Well, it's funny. If I could plug my own show again, The Power of Positive Geeking, one of the things that on that show in season 1 was I told my guest, pick any character in the movie and recast him with Bill Murray. Because Bill Murray makes everything a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out Bill Murray, maybe not the nicest guy. Yeah. As Gina Davis gave an interview talking about how awful he was when he directed her on the movie Quick Change. Mm-hmm. Like, well, you know what? If I'm going to restart the show, I don't want to go with Bill Murray. So who's kind of uncancelable? Like, who's just that wonderful, wonderful human being that'll never get canceled and also makes every movie they're in better? So I thought Keanu Reeves. So I thought, and I gave you the assignment to him, like, let's do this tonight as kind of like almost the soft launch of Power Positive Geeking, talking about Glenngary Glen Ross. If you could recast one role in this film with Keanu Reeves, who would it be and why? And mine came to me immediately. And it's Larry Spannell, the guy that Jack Lemmon visits. Because you show up at Keanu Reeves' house and he's playing that character and he's got that kind of, aw shucks, yeah, he can come in and, as Jack Lemmon barges his way and immediately takes off his coat and his hat and he's still talking and just making himself at home. I could see Keanu Reeves kind of playing that and then kind of getting a little more John Wickish near the end when he's telling him to leave his house. So I thought Bruce Almond did great, but I think Keanu Reeves would take it just that notch higher. Okay,
let me ask you a qualifying question because I didn't know you when this podcast came out, and I've only listened to one episode so far since you just launched the original season. Are we looking at Keanu Reeves the person, or are we looking at Keanu Reeves one of the characters he played? Like, am I looking at Keanu as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, or am I just looking at the person Keanu Reeves?
You're looking at the actor, Keanu Reeves.
Okay.
What part would you recast with him in it? Because like when I see like the Larry Spannell character, you got to be kind of quiet and kind of inviting, kind of Canadian, which Keanu Reeves is. Mm-hmm. But as it's going on, it's finally like, you know what? No, my wife's not here. No, you can't come back. We're not interested. And I thought Keanu Reeves could kind of do a really good job of that.
I definitely see why you're saying that. And I would agree with that, but I would be curious. Like, I don't know if that's enough Keanu for me because that's only one scene in the movie.
That's true.
I'm tempted to say George Arnaud.
Really?
Yeah.
He would be very good in that role. I agree.
He's got that sad look about him that I'll believe whatever you say, even though in his mind he doesn't. As a human being, he's very smart. But that look he's got on his face these days with the beard and everything, he always kind of looks a little bit sad and out of place to me. I think he could pull that off really well.
he's just at peace. Like he's at peace. Another one I thought maybe was John Williamson, the Kevin Spacey character.
Oh yeah.
Because you kind of got to play both sides of a spectrum there too.
And he can get aggressive. We saw that in Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino.
Yep.
And apart from a horrible Southern accent, that was an excellent movie.
It's not about so much taking away an actor as it is just this is even the best movies can be made just a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think Keanu Reeves just makes everything, including life, just a little bit better.
He's like the Candyman. He just brings that something that just makes the world a better place.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. I will say I loved the whole exchange between Ricky and Moss. The back and forth that they had, you just felt like there was such a history between these guys. I mean, that's acting.
Yeah. And normally it would be Al Pacino in like the angry side of the fight, right?
Yeah.
And Edharris would kind of be the combo, but no, it's Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's like, why are you yelling? What are you doing? And Dave Moss is just flying off the handle. And that, again, it's kind of a misdirect because he just walks out of his interview with the police and he is so upset. Like, you can't talk to me like that, blah, blah, blah. So you think, okay, Dave Moss, obviously we saw him talking about this earlier. He had something to do with it. And turns out he did.
Right. And I have to wonder, though, was that anger because he really hated the way the cop talked to him? Was that something he would have done anyway? Or was that to play up, making it, throw them off the scent a little bit?
I don't get the impression that Dave Moss is that smart, that he would do that to kind of try and throw them off the trail. I think he's just a highly emotional person. And when they started accusing him of things, it turns out he actually did. That's when he got like kind of all angry about it.
Well, you're talking about a guy that eats 2 regular donuts, 2 chocolate donuts, and then gets the same to take home.
That's right.
So he's all sugared up.
Yeah.
Because he had 4 more donuts in the morning before he had to go to the office. Because think about the mental state of him going into the office the next day after he knows that Shelley should have taken the leads. He doesn't know whether he pulled it off, maybe. Maybe Shelley called him, maybe he didn't.
No, because they make the deal after the fact, right?
Well, they had to have, yeah.
Yeah, because Shelley even says as he's blathering, they're like, I got 5,000. I think Dave actually got more. And we know Dave's deal was for more because he told George that in the Chinese restaurant. He says, it doesn't matter to you what I'm getting. Originally, he said like 75. I bet you it's a hell of a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So, I think he just had the same conversation with Shell as he did with George.
Yeah, and Shell was just more desperate enough to probably not even need to be threatened into it the way that he tried with Aronoff.
Yeah, it was like, you want to rob the office? I'm in. Like, probably immediately. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Like you said, just desperate times, right?
But let's talk a little bit about David Mamet's dialogue style, because he is very dialogue heavy. He's very fast, rapid back and forth. And I think you really need actors of this caliber to pull it off the way they did.
Well, and it's an interesting pace that you kind of have to do too. Its own cadence in a David Mamet script, which is really quite interesting, to the point where they played out a lot of things in 2 shots when they were shooting it, and then they would do all the close-ups after, and they would actually use editing to try and cut it up, because a lot of these were just played out, full 3, 4, 5 minute scenes just all the way through, almost like a play. And then in editing, they would actually try and break up and get that cadence, that rhythm, to match David Mamet's dialogue type.
Yeah, and that makes sense because, take after take, you're going to slow down. You're going to start really thinking about how you're saying things more than just saying them in character. Your first couple takes are usually the best couple. Well, the first one's usually a little bit shaky. Second and third takes are usually the best. And after that, it starts to go downhill. Exactly.
Yeah. I think he's almost kind of like an Aaron Sorkin style. You can always kind of tell an Aaron Sorkin written scene because it can be just a master shot, and it's just this kind of bang, 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 rapid fire kind of dialogue between the two. It's almost like David Mamet. Whereas in a movie like The Social Network, which is directed by David Fincher, he chose to show those in just kind of more of master shots and just let the actors kind of do that. Whereas James Foley in this film actually used editing to try and kind of mash those together, which I thought was an interesting way to do it. I really like how James Foley edited the film and how he used the camera. There's a lot of times where you're just kind of back, and all of a sudden he just kind of swoops in as things are kind of, taking a turn. I think about the Al Pacino scenes when he's talking to Jonathan Pryce, and you're wide in the booth, all of a sudden, boom, you kind of zoom around as he pulls out the brochure, and it's kind of almost how you're an outsider until it comes to the pitch. Yeah. And then the camera comes in and you become part of the thing. And it was really cool.
I thought the cinematography was fantastic. The angles that they showed, kind of the difference between, like, they show a little bit over the top of Al Pacino when he's sitting down, but Edharris, they've got a little bit beneath him, slightly pointing up at points. And it's really interesting, the dynamic of those two angles during that argument. And they even showed Al Pacino getting up and walking around, and he didn't look as short as he really is. They played that camera angle very well. He looked a little more menacing than he is in real life. Not like the way they cast him against 7'9" Ellen Barkin in Sea of Love.
That's true. And actually, this photographer, I really don't know anything about him. Looking at his IMDb credits, and it's a lot of movies. A lot of TV shows and TV movies.
Okay.
So not a lot of theatrical features. He's actually been nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys, and that's really about it.
Wow. Well, that's still good, though. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But I think the interesting thing is, though, even though the dialogue was edited, it feels so natural, doesn't it? It feels like they're really having this fight live.
Well, and that's why you hire the cast you do.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes from a filmmaker is Ridley Scott when he says, if you cast your movie well, you've done 80% of the work.
True.
And that's what happened here. Mm-hmm. Like, you just hire the best cast possible who are going to do all the heavy lifting for you. And it almost doesn't really matter what you do. It's still going to turn out good. Now, you can make it better. And I think James Foley does a good job of making it better in terms of shooting style and editing style.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it really all comes down to the cast and how they're performing it. And again, in a career that is almost unmatched, Jack Lemmon, probably my favorite role of Jack Lemmon's by far.
Yeah. Yeah, he's done a lot of great stuff. But this, I think the tears that were in his eyes that never came out was one of the biggest selling points of how he really felt, how intense all this really was for Shelley Levine.
Yep.
On the phone when
your heart breaks for him. But then you got and this is just after him being a total asshole to Kevin Spacey, where he's just this egomaniacal, like, oh yeah, then I sat at their kitchen table and I held that pen for 20 minutes until he signed on the dot. And he thought he was just the hottest thing on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And then he realizes it was all bullshit.
Well, his confidence had been broken. And to have a moment where you sold something that you were told, or everybody's telling you can't do, they're all showing each other their leads and going, this is all crap. And then selling it and thinking, I am a salesman. I am born to do this. I've saved my daughter. We're back. And then to have it shattered again. I mean, that's just, but the final look in his eyes when he looks up at Kevin Spacey and goes, my daughter, and Kevin just looks at him and goes, fuck you. Yeah. That look in Shelley's eyes, the tears, you can see the liquid welling up in his eyes, the shaking and everything. It's one of the most beautiful moments on film for me.
Yeah. It's wonderful. And there was going to be a scene that preceded that with Ricky Roma where he goes to John Williamson and tells him, something underhanded about Shelley, just to kind of show that even like all these characters kind of have that shitty side of them. But I think they wisely cut that out. And then you have Ricky just kind of praising, that's the machine. He's a legend. We should partner on stuff. You're brilliant. You're brilliant, as he's going in to the office again to talk to the cops again.
Right. Well, that might explain a couple of reactions of Ricky Roma that I didn't understand.
Okay. Yeah.
One was when he said, you closed him this morning.
Yeah.
He seemed really interested in that. The look on his face, the inflection in his voice, like that was an important thing. And I didn't understand why that would be such an important detail. But I thought maybe he was thinking, wait a minute, if he did that this morning, he wasn't busy last night. Maybe he robbed the place.
Yeah, no, I think it was more of you closed them this morning, so you don't know yet they have no money.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, because I think what he was going to go tell Williamson was, these people are not, that check will never clear.
Right.
Because people are just nuts and want to talk to salesmen.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of throw Shelley under the bus a little.
And then the other one was when he said you sold him 3 units Mountain View. Like he was surprised it was Mountain View. And to me, like customer isn't going to know the difference of this piece of land or that piece of land. Either they're buying from the salesman or they're not. So I thought that was kind of an odd thing he focused on too.
Yeah, other than Mountain View is one of the really old ones that I think maybe just those are the toughest to sell because they're known pieces of crap.
Right, yeah.
Because he was already working on Glenngary, right? Like he wasn't even on the Glen Ross portfolio. He was doing Glenngary already. So,
Well,
that was another one. He's like, and it was 8 units, not 3. So that's even like you sold 8 units of Mountain View. Like really, that's a swamp. I don't know what the problem with Mountain View was. They never told us, but it could be something like that.
Right.